A chance encounter in the marketplace. In the bustling marketplace of Kittim Prime, vibrant colors swirl together like a painter's palette, creating a mesmerizing backdrop for the throngs of traders and shoppers. The air was alive with the sounds of haggling voices, laughter, and the enticing aromas of exotic foods wafting from nearby stalls. Vendors called out to potential buyers, their stalls overflowing with everything from shimmering fabrics to rare artifacts collected from across the galaxy. This chaotic symphony was the heart of the planet, a meeting point for beings of all shapes and sizes, and today it was the stage for an unexpected encounter. Amidst the lively crowd was Steve Madrock, a rugged human mercenary with a reputation for getting things done, sometimes through charm, but more often through sheer force. His dark hair was tousled, and a stubble-covered jaw hinted at long days spent away from civilization. Today, he was on a mission. He needed a quantum flux regulator to fix his battered ship, the Starbreaker, which was parked in a dimly lit dock on the edge of the city. The job he had accepted on Arcturus 9 promised a hefty payout, but only if he could make it there before the impending solar flares rendered space travel perilous. As Steve navigated through the crowd, his mind was lost in thought, running through the details of his mission. He barely noticed the commotion around him until he collided with someone, causing a cascade of colorful parcels to tumble to the ground. Startled, he looked up to find a striking alien woman with shimmering blue skin and vibrant violet eyes glaring at him. "Watch it, jackass," she snapped, her pointed ears twitching with annoyance. Steve, recovering quickly, bent down to help her gather her scattered belongings. As he handed her a small, ornate box, their fingers brushed, and a sudden rush of warmth surged through him. It was then he caught a whiff of her scent, an intoxicating mix of cinnamon and cloves that sent his senses reeling. "Sorry about that," he mumbled, trying to regain his composure. The alien woman froze, her pupils dilating as she leaned in closer, inhaling deeply. "You smell delicious," she purred, her voice low and sultry. A look of pure, primal hunger crossed her exquisite features. Steve's heart raced as he instinctively stepped back, hands raised. "Whoa there, I'm flattered, but—" Before he could finish his sentence, she lunged forward, wrapping her arms around his neck and burying her face against his chest. He was taken aback, unable to process the intensity of her embrace as she nuzzled him, emitting soft chirping sounds of contentment. People began to stare, and Steve's mind raced as he tried to figure out how to disentangle himself from this beautiful yet bewildering creature. "Lady, I don't even know your name," he protested weakly. "Selana," she said, gazing up at him with adoration. "And you're my mate now. I will never let you go." Steve's thoughts spiraled. How the hell had he ended up in this predicament? The last thing he wanted was to be married to a pheromone-crazed alien, or, worse, skinned alive by her enraged relatives. He glanced around for an escape route and spotted a narrow alleyway. Maybe if he could just get her somewhere private, he could talk some sense into her. "Listen, Zelana," he said, scooping her up as she squealed with delight, her legs wrapping around his waist. "I'm sure you're a lovely girl, but this is all moving a bit fast for me." As they reached the alley, he set her down, maintaining a firm grip on her shoulders. "We need to talk." Zelana was too busy trying to shove her hands under his shirt, her wide violet eyes gleaming with desire. "Please, I need you," she whined desperately. "I've never smelled anything like you before. It's driving me insane." "I get that," Steve said, struggling to keep his voice calm. "But you can't just jump a guy in the street. How about we go somewhere to sit down and discuss this like rational adults?" Zelana pouted, her full blue lips forming a tempting line. "I don't want to be rational. I want to rip your clothes off and lick every inch of your body." Steve swallowed hard, trying to shake off the rising heat in his body. He had to get out of this situation before he did something he'd regret. "Tell you what," he said, inspiration striking. "I've got to pick up that part for my ship. Why don't you come with me? Afterwards, we can grab a drink and see where things go." Solana considered this, her eyes lighting up with excitement. Yes, yes, I'll come with you. She pressed closer, nuzzling under his chin. But you have to promise we'll mate later. Let's take it one step at a time, Steve replied, extracting himself from her embrace and running a hand through his hair, trying to look composed. First, we need to find that quantum flux regulator. As they made their way back into the marketplace, Steve tried to ignore the way his skin tingled at her touch. The day was already turning into a long, strange adventure, but he reminded himself that this was just another day in the life of a rakish space mercenary. Little did they know, a cloaked figure was watching from the shadows, cold, calculating eyes tracking their every move. The hunter had found its prey at last. Steve's contact was waiting for him in a dingy little shop off the main thoroughfare, the quantum flux regulator just as promised. The proprietor, a greasy Clitonian with a lazy eye, handed it over without much fuss, more interested in the credits Steve slapped onto the counter. As they exited the shop, Solana slipped her hand possessively into his back pocket. He jumped at the intimate contact, trying to dislodge her wandering fingers. Okay, ground rules. No groping in public, and no more talk about mating until we've had a conversation that doesn't revolve around how edible I smell, he said, half-joking. Solana giggled, mischief sparkling in her eyes, but she nodded obediently. I'll be good for now. Shaking his head, Steve led the way through the winding streets. He spotted a bar not far from their location, a hole in the wall that catered to spacers and mercs looking to wet their whistles without drawing too much attention. It was perfect for a private chat with his new alien admirer. Once inside, they slid into a booth at the back, Steve trying to process the whirlwind of events that had just unfolded. He ordered them a couple of Clitonian ales, hoping the potent brew would help steady his nerves. Being the object of such intense desire was flattering, yet also unnerving. He needed to gain control of the situation. Okay, I'm guessing this whole "you smell delicious" thing is some kind of pheromone reaction, right? Because I've never had a woman throw herself at me quite so literally before, he said, trying to keep the tone light. Solana nodded, sipping her drink. Your scent calls to me. I've never experienced anything like it. As soon as I caught a whiff, I knew I had to make you mine. How does that work, exactly? Steve asked cautiously. Is this a mating for life deal or more of a wham-bam thank you ma'am situation? She frowned, not understanding the reference. I don't know what that means, but I do know that I will never desire another the way I desire you. We are bonded now, you and I, two halves of the same whole. Steve felt a knot tightening in his stomach. This was far more complicated than he had anticipated. Rubbing a hand over his face, he tried to think clearly. Look, Solana, I'm incredibly flattered, really, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that kind of commitment. We just met, and while I'll admit there's a definite attraction here. Before he could finish, a shadow fell over their table. He looked up to see a hulking Clitonian looming over them, his craggy face twisted into a scowl. Solana, the newcomer growled. What are you doing with this human filth? Solana's eyes widened, then narrowed. She stood, putting herself between Steve and the interloper. Prios, I might have known you'd follow me. Well, you're too late. I found my mate, and it isn't you. Krios slammed a meaty fist on the table, the sound echoing through the bar. You're mine, female. I won't let some smooth-skinned off-worlder steal you away. Steve slowly reached for his blaster, hiding the movement beneath the table. He had a feeling things were about to get ugly. Back off, he warned. I don't want to hurt you, but I will if I have to. Krios laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. As if a puny human could hurt me. I'll rip you apart and take Solana as my prize. With that, he charged, heedless of Steve's warning. In a swift motion, Steve threw himself sideways, narrowly avoiding evisceration as Krios lunged for his throat. He came up with his blaster drawn, leveling it at the Clitonian's snarling face. Clash in the shadows. The atmosphere in the bar thickened with tension as Krios charged, his massive frame barreling towards Steve like a freight train. Steve's heart raced, the instinct to survive kicking in as he fired again. The blaster's energy bolt hit Cryos in the shoulder, but the Plutonian barely flinched. With a roar that shook the very foundation of the bar, Cryos lunged again, and Steve knew he had mere seconds to react. "Zelana, get down," Steve shouted as he dove sideways, narrowly avoiding Cryos' outstretched claws. The force of the Plutonian's charge sent chairs flying as he crashed into the table where they had just sat, splintering it into 1,000 pieces. The patrons of the bar, once relaxed and jovial, now scattered like leaves in a storm, their startled faces painted with fear. Steve could hear them shouting, some calling for help, others just panicking. But all that mattered to him was the fight at hand. "Stay back," he yelled, positioning himself to keep Cryos in his sights. The Plutonian's thick hide was legendary for its resilience, but Steve had no choice. He had to find a way to subdue him before things escalated further. He remembered the blaster training he had received years ago, focusing on the crucial aim and timing. Cryos laughed, a harsh sound that resonated throughout the bar, his bared teeth glistening in the dim light. "You think you can defeat me, human? You're just an insect to be crushed." With a quick glance, Steve assessed his surroundings, looking for anything he could use as an advantage. He spotted a broken piece of wood from the destroyed table, a hefty plank that might serve as a makeshift weapon. As Cryos lunged again, Steve ducked, rolled, and snatched up the plank, swinging it with all his might. The makeshift weapon connected with Cryos' side, and for the first time, the Plutonian stumbled back, surprise flashing across his features. Fueled by adrenaline, Steve pressed his advantage, charging forward with the plank raised high. "Stay down," Steve shouted, swinging the plank again, this time targeting Cryos' legs. But the Plutonian, recovering quickly, sidestepped the blow and countered with a vicious backhand that sent Steve sprawling across the floor. The impact knocked the breath from his lungs, and for a moment, everything went dark. As he struggled to regain his senses, Steve heard Zelana's fierce voice cutting through the chaos. "Get away from him, Cryos. He's mine." In a flash, she was at Steve's side, her eyes ablaze with a primal fury that took his breath away. He had never seen her like this, powerful, unyielding, and utterly determined. Zelana stood firm, her lithe body poised for battle, sharp teeth bared in a threatening snarl. Cryos looked taken aback, momentarily thrown off by her fierce declaration. "You dare protect this human," he snarled, confusion mingling with rage. "Not just any human," Zelana growled, her voice low and dangerous. "He is my mate. You will not take him from me." Steve, still on the ground, looked up at her with a mix of admiration and disbelief. He had only known Zelana for a few hours, yet she was willing to face off against this hulking brute for him. The thought sent warmth coursing through his veins, igniting a fierce determination of his own. "Get up, Steve," Zelana urged, her fierce gaze unwavering as she faced Cryos. "We can't let him win." With her encouragement, Steve sprang to his feet, gripping the plank tightly. "All right, Cryos," he said, adrenaline surging through him. "Let's see what you've got." The Plutonian lunged again, and this time, Steve was ready. He dodged to the side, swinging the plank with all his strength, aiming for Cryos' midsection. The blow landed with a satisfying thud, causing Cryos to stagger backward, his face contorting with fury. But the Plutonian was relentless. He rolled and charged once more, this time with renewed vigor. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Steve's mind raced, weighing his options. He could try to escape through the back, but Cryos would undoubtedly pursue them. They needed to end this now. "Zelana," he shouted, catching her eye. "Distract him." With a fierce cry, Zelana lunged at Cryos, catching him off guard. She danced around him with incredible agility, her movements a blur as she struck at his arms and legs, attempting to keep him off balance. It was a risky maneuver, but Steve knew it was their best chance. Seizing the opportunity, Steve moved in, determined to make every shot count. He took aim with his blaster, his heart pounding as he squeezed the trigger. The energy bolt hit Kreos squarely in the chest, and this time, the Clatonian faltered, surprise etched across his face. "Enough," Kreos bellowed, his voice thick with pain and anger. He staggered, clutching his chest as he tried to regain his footing. But Steve wasn't done yet. "You picked the wrong fight, Kreos," he shouted, charging forward once more, using the plank like a spear. With a powerful thrust, he jabbed it into Kreos's gut, forcing the larger alien to his knees. Zelana stood beside him, panting heavily but ready to fight. Together, they had pushed Kreos to his limits, but it was clear that the Clatonian wasn't finished yet. With a growl, he reached out, attempting to grab Steve's leg. "Finish him," Zelana shouted, her eyes fierce and unyielding. Now, in a moment of clarity, Steve realized they needed to end this fight decisively. He stepped back, allowing Kreos to stagger forward, then pivoted to face him squarely. With one last surge of adrenaline, he raised the plank high above his head, aiming for a decisive blow. "Goodbye, Kreos," he yelled as he swung down with all his might. The plank connected with a loud crack, and the Clatonian crumpled to the floor, unconscious. The bar fell silent, the only sound being the heavy breathing of Steve and Zelana as they stood over Kreos's fallen form. The patrons slowly re-emerged from their hiding places, awe and fear written across their faces. "Whoever that human is, he just took down Kreos," one voice murmured, disbelief coloring his tone. Zelana turned to Steve, her fierce demeanor softening. "You did it," she said, her eyes shining with admiration. "You fought for us, for our bond." "Yeah, well," Steve replied, still catching his breath, "I didn't exactly plan on that happening today." As they stood together, a sense of camaraderie washed over them, binding them closer than before. Steve couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of their adventure together. But even as he felt victorious, a deeper concern began to gnaw at him. "What now?" he asked, looking around the bar, which was now eerily quiet. "Kreos might have allies. We need to get out of here before more of them show up." Zelana nodded, her expression turning serious. "You're right. We can't stay here." With that, they turned to leave, but just as they reached the door, a chilling voice echoed from the shadows of the bar. "It seems you've made quite a name for yourself, human." Steve's heart dropped as he recognized the cloaked figure from earlier, the one who had been watching them. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a sleek body clad in dark armor, eyes gleaming with cold calculation. "By order of the Galactic Consortium," the figure said, "you are under arrest for crimes against sentience. Surrender now, or face the consequences." Zelana bristled, stepping protectively in front of Steve. "We'll never go back. I'd rather die than be your slave again." Steve's instincts flared as he felt the tension mount once more. "Time to earn my mercenary stripes again," he muttered, adrenaline surging through his veins. With no other choice, he and Zelana sprang into action, prepared to face whatever threats awaited them. In that moment, the bond they shared solidified, readying them for the challenges to come as they prepared to fight against the shadows lurking in the depths of space. The chase had only just begun. The escape plan. The tension in the bar crackled like static electricity as the cloaked figure advanced, his presence exuding menace. Steve felt his pulse quicken, adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was no ordinary bounty hunter. This was someone with connections to the Galactic Consortium, and that meant trouble. He quickly assessed the situation, realizing that retreat was not an option. "Zelana, we need to move," he urged, his voice low and urgent. "There's no telling how many of them are out there." Zelana nodded, her eyes blazing with determination. "I won't go back to being a slave. We'll fight together." The figure sneered, raising a sleek plasma rifle that shimmered in the dim light of the bar. "You think you can escape? You're outnumbered and outmatched." Steve felt a surge of defiance. "Maybe, but we've got a few tricks up our sleeves." He quickly scanned the room for an exit, his mind racing with potential escape routes. The back door was still open, but it wouldn't be enough to avoid confrontation. They needed a plan. "Follow my lead," Steve whispered to Zelana as he motioned toward a side exit that led into the alley. With his heart pounding, he bolted toward the door, grabbing Zelana's hand to pull her along. As they raced through the alley, the sounds of chaos faded behind them, replaced by the distant hum of the marketplace. But they couldn't stop yet. The cloaked figure was still pursuing them. "Where are we going?" Zelana panted, her long legs keeping pace with Steve's hurried strides. "I have a ship parked not far from here," he replied, glancing over his shoulder. "If we can get there, we might have a chance to escape." The alley twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the maze of streets that characterized Ketum Prime. Steve's instincts kicked in, guiding him as he navigated through the darkened corners and poorly lit paths. They dashed past vendors packing up their stalls, the frantic energy of the marketplace still echoing in their ears. "Wait." Zelana suddenly halted, pulling him to a stop. "What if he has more people waiting for us at your ship?" Steve took a deep breath, considering her point. "You're right, we need a distraction." His eyes darted around, spotting a pile of crates nearby. An idea formed in his mind. "Can you use your strength to push those crates into the street?" he asked, pointing at the stack. Zelana's eyes sparkled with mischief. "You want me to cause chaos? I like it." "Just enough chaos to cover our escape," Steve clarified. "Got it." She grinned, rushing over to the crates. With surprising agility, she pushed them into the street with a force that sent them tumbling over one another, creating a barrier that blocked the alley entrance. "Perfect," Steve exclaimed, feeling a rush of excitement. "Now, let's get moving." As they continued running, the sounds of the marketplace faded behind them, replaced by the distant rumble of the city's industrial sector. Steve felt a mixture of exhilaration and dread. The stakes had never been higher. He was not just trying to save himself anymore, he was also protecting Zelana. They rounded a corner and caught sight of the dilapidated docking bay where the Starbreaker lay waiting. The freighter was battered and scratched, but it was their ticket to freedom. As they approached, Steve's heart sank. "No," he shouted, "it's open." The ship's hatch stood wide, an invitation that felt more like a trap. "We have to hurry." He urged Zelana, "Get inside." Without hesitation, she bounded up the ramp, her blue skin shimmering under the dim lights of the freighter's interior. Steve followed closely, securing the hatch behind them, just as a distant shout echoed from the alley. "Steve, Zelana." "Looks like they found our trail," Steve said, adrenaline spiking again. "Let's get this ship ready to fly." He rushed to the control panel, fingers flying over the buttons and switches. The lights flickered to life as systems booted up, and the ship hummed with energy. "I'll start the engines. You check the sensors." Zelana moved to the sensor station, her fingers delicately brushing the controls. "There's no sign of anyone right now, but that won't last long," she reported, her brows furrowed in concentration. As Steve worked to bring the ship's systems online, he could hear footsteps approaching. "We need to move. Now," he shouted, adrenaline pushing him to hurry. With a deep breath, he initiated the launch sequence. The ship trembled as the engines roared to life, vibrating through his bones. "Hang on," he called out to Zelana as he pulled the throttle. The Starbreaker shot forward, the docking bay doors sliding shut behind them, just as a blaster bolt scorched the space where they had been standing moments before. "Take us up," Zelana shouted, gripping the seat as the ship climbed into the sky. "I'm trying," Steve grunted, focused on the controls. He maneuvered the ship through the narrow opening of the docking bay and into the vastness of space, the stars glittering against the blackness like distant jewels. "Where do we go now?" Zelana asked, her voice tense but excited. Steve glanced at the navigation console, scanning for nearby planets. "We need to find somewhere we can lay low, regroup, and figure out our next move." There's a small planet not far from here, Zelana suggested, pointing to a blip on the screen. It's mostly uninhabited, but it has resources we can use. Perfect, Steve replied, setting a course for the distant world. Let's hope we can rest and figure out how to deal with the consortium before they catch up with us. As they entered hyperspace, the stars streaked past them, a blur of light and color. Steve leaned back in his seat, exhaling slowly. We made it. For now. Zelana turned to him, her violet eyes sparkling. You were incredible back there. You fought him off, and we escaped together. Steve chuckled, feeling a warmth spread through him at her praise. I couldn't have done it without you. You're the real powerhouse here. She smiled, her expression softening. Together, we make a great team. As they journeyed through the star-speckled void, Steve felt a sense of camaraderie blossom between them. They were two souls thrown together by fate, battling against a universe that seemed intent on keeping them apart. But even as they sailed into the unknown, a deeper sense of foreboding loomed in Steve's mind. The Galactic Consortium was powerful, and they wouldn't let this escape go unpunished. What happens if they find us? He asked, the reality of their situation settling in. What will we do then? Zelana's expression turned serious, her brows knitting together. We fight back. Together. We'll find a way to outsmart them. You saw how powerful I can be. With your skills and my strength, we can take on anything. Steve nodded, feeling a surge of determination. You're right. We won't let them take us down without a fight. As the ship hurtled through space, they began to formulate a plan to not only survive, but to confront the consortium and reclaim their freedom. They had forged an unexpected alliance, and together they would stand against the darkness that threatened to engulf them. With that newfound resolve, they set their sights on the unknown planet ahead, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. The adventure had just begun, and their journey together would lead them into the heart of danger, discovery, and ultimately, destiny. Secrets of the Uncharted Planet. As the Starbreaker glided through the void of space, the familiar hum of the engines filled Steve's ears, offering a brief comfort amidst the chaos of their escape. The view from the cockpit was breathtaking. Streaks of starlight flashed by, a reminder of how far they had come and how much lay ahead. They were heading toward an uncharted planet, a wild and mysterious world where they hoped to find refuge. Settle in, Zelana, Steve said, adjusting the ship's trajectory. We're coming in for a landing soon. Zelana sat in the co-pilot's seat, her eyes sparkling with excitement and curiosity. What do you think we'll find down there? She asked, her voice filled with anticipation. Steve shrugged, his mind racing. Hopefully, it's a place where we can lay low and figure out our next move. I've heard stories about uninhabited planets. Sometimes they hide secrets, ancient technologies, or even resources that could help us. Secrets, huh? Zelana mused, a playful smile crossing her lips. I like the sound of that. As they approached the planet, the view shifted from the cold expanse of space to a swerving tapestry of greens and blues, indicative of a world thriving with life. The atmosphere shimmered, hints of clouds swirling over lush forests and sparkling oceans. Looks like paradise, Steve remarked, a sense of wonder creeping into his voice. Let's hope it stays that way. He maneuvered the ship closer, searching for a suitable landing spot amidst the dense foliage. The sensors indicated a clear area near the edge of a sprawling jungle. There, that clearing looks perfect, he pointed out. Zelana leaned forward, her eyes wide with excitement. Let's do it. With practiced ease, Steve guided the Starbreaker down, the ship's landing gear crunching against the thick grass as they touched down. As the engines powered down, a profound silence enveloped them, broken only by the sounds of distant wildlife and the rustling of leaves. We made it, he said, allowing a smile to spread across his face. Welcome to our new temporary home. Zelana opened the hatch, stepping out onto the vibrant alien soil. The air was rich with the scent of blooming flowers and damp earth, a refreshing change from the metallic tang of the ship. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply as a warm breeze caressed her skin. "This is amazing," she exclaimed, her voice filled with delight. Steve joined her outside, taking in the surroundings. Towering trees with iridescent leaves swayed gently, their colors shifting in the sunlight. Exotic flowers bloomed in every hue imaginable, and the sound of distant birds filled the air. It was unlike any place he had ever seen. "Let's explore," Steve suggested, pulling out a small handheld scanner from his utility belt. "I want to get a read on the area, check for any signs of civilization or danger." Zelana nodded eagerly, her violet eyes scanning the horizon. "I'll keep an eye out, just in case someone, or something, decides to pay us a visit." As they ventured into the jungle, Steve activated the scanner, watching as the screen lit up with data. "No signs of intelligent life so far, but the wildlife readings are off the charts," he said, his brow furrowing in concentration. "Looks like we'll have plenty of natural resources around." Zelana laughed softly, her voice playful. "So we could build a little hideout here, a secret base just for us." "Why not?" Steve replied with a grin, his heart lightening at the idea. "We could have our own adventure." The two of them wandered deeper into the jungle, marveling at the strange flora and fauna around them. Brightly colored creatures flitted through the trees, their calls echoing through the air, while enormous blossoms bloomed beneath their feet, releasing intoxicating scents that made Steve dizzy. "Look at that!" Zelana pointed excitedly at a cluster of bioluminescent plants that glowed a brilliant blue in the shadows. "They're beautiful." "Yeah, they are," Steve agreed, snapping a few pictures with his scanner. "We might be able to use these for light sources later." After some time exploring, they stumbled upon a small, sparkling stream. The water was crystal clear, glistening like diamonds as it flowed over smooth stones. "This is perfect," Steve said, kneeling down to take a sip. The water was cool and refreshing, washing away the tension of their recent escape. Zelana knelt beside him, laughing as she splashed water onto her face. "I could get used to this," she said, her eyes bright. They shared a moment of laughter, the weight of their troubles momentarily forgotten. But as they rested by the stream, a sense of unease began to creep back into Steve's mind. "We need to stay vigilant," he said, glancing around. "The consortium won't stop hunting us." "Do you think they'll find us here?" Zelana asked, her voice softening. "I hope not," he replied, his tone serious. "But we have to be prepared for anything. If they find this planet, we'll have nowhere to run." Zelana nodded, her expression turning determined. "Then we should make a plan. If they come, we can ambush them. I won't let them take me back." Steve felt a surge of admiration for her bravery. "I like the way you think, but we'll need supplies if we want to stand a chance. Let's see what we can gather here. We might find something useful in this jungle." Together, they began searching the area for anything that could aid their survival. They collected fruits that glistened like jewels, nuts that crunched with flavor, and even some edible plants that Steve recognized from his travels. As they worked, Steve felt a growing bond with Zelana, a shared sense of purpose igniting between them. She moved with grace, her agile form darting between the trees as she gathered supplies, her laughter mingling with the sounds of the jungle. "We should also consider building some defenses," he suggested, tying vines together to create a makeshift rope. "If the consortium does come, we need to be ready." Zelana's eyes sparkled with excitement. "What do you have in mind?" "Simple traps, something to slow them down if they try to pursue us. We can use the natural resources here to our advantage," he explained. As they began to brainstorm ideas, Steve felt a spark of creativity igniting within him. Together, they mapped out a plan, sketching designs in the dirt with sticks. The jungle became their canvas, and the possibilities seemed endless. After a few hours of gathering supplies and setting up rudimentary defenses, they decided to take a break. They found a clear area by the stream, where the sun filtered through the trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Let's rest here for a moment, Steve suggested, sitting back against a smooth stone. He closed his eyes, listening to the sounds of the jungle, the rustling leaves, the distant calls of birds, and the gentle rush of the stream. Zelana joined him, sitting close, her presence radiating warmth and comfort. "Do you think we'll ever be able to go back?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I don't know," Steve admitted, "but we can't think about that now. We have to focus on surviving and finding a way to fight back." Zelana nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I just don't want to be a slave again. I won't go back to that life." "Neither will I," Steve assured her, his voice steady. "We'll fight for our freedom together. No one gets to decide our fate but us." Zelana's eyes brightened at his words, and a smile broke through her earlier tension. "You're right. Together, we're unstoppable." Their camaraderie deepened as they shared stories of their pasts, each opening up about their experiences, fears, and dreams. Steve recounted his life as a mercenary, the struggles he faced in a galaxy filled with conflict, while Zelana shared her own journey, one of resilience and the fight for freedom against oppression. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together, united by their shared resolve. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together," Steve promised, looking into her determined eyes. With newfound determination, they returned to their makeshift camp, ready to implement their plans. The darkness of the jungle began to settle in, but Steve and Zelana knew that within that darkness lay the promise of adventure and the possibility of freedom. They were prepared to confront whatever challenges awaited them, no matter how daunting. With each passing moment, their bonds strengthened, weaving a tapestry of trust and resilience that would serve as their shield against the galaxy's dangers. As the stars began to twinkle above, they fell into a comfortable silence, aware that the journey ahead would be perilous. But together, they felt ready to face whatever lay beyond the horizon. The fight for their future had only just begun. Shadows in the jungle. As night enveloped the jungle, the vibrant colors of the day faded into deep shades of blue and black, creating an ethereal landscape illuminated only by the soft glow of bioluminescent plants scattered throughout the underbrush. The sounds of the jungle transformed as well, with the calls of distant creatures echoing in the dark, their haunting melodies weaving a tapestry of mystery and intrigue. Steve sat by the stream, sharpening a makeshift spear he had fashioned from a sturdy branch. The rhythmic scrape of his knife against the wood was soothing, grounding him amidst the uncertainty of their situation. Zelana was nearby, gathering more supplies for their defenses, her movements graceful as she danced between the glowing plants, casting enchanting shadows on the ground. "Do you think they'll come tonight?" she asked, her voice cutting through the tranquil sounds of the jungle. Steve paused, his heart tightening at the thought. "I hope not, but we can't let our guard down. The consortium will be relentless in their pursuit." Zelana nodded, her expression serious. "Then we should set up watches. We can take turns keeping an eye out for any sign of trouble." "Good idea," he replied, impressed by her strategic thinking. "I'll take the first watch. You should get some rest." She hesitated for a moment, then moved to sit beside him. "I don't want to sleep alone, not out here. It feels too quiet." A sense of protectiveness surged within Steve. "All right then, we'll keep each other company." As they settled into a comfortable silence, Steve couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The jungle had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, the shadows shifting in ways that suggested they weren't alone. He glanced at Zelana, her blue skin glowing faintly under the moonlight. "You know, it's kind of peaceful here," he mused, trying to lighten the mood. "If we weren't hiding from the consortium, I could get used to this." Zelana smiled softly, the tension in her shoulders easing. "I feel it too. There's something magical about this place." They spent the next few hours exchanging stories and laughter, sharing tales of their pasts and dreams for the future. Steve found himself opening up more than he had intended, revealing the loneliness that came with his life as a mercenary, the sacrifices he had made for the sake of survival. I never thought I'd find someone like you out here, he admitted, glancing at her. Someone who understands what it means to fight for freedom. Zelana met his gaze, her eyes shimmering in the moonlight. And I never thought I would find a mate who would stand by my side, someone who sees me as I am, not as a slave. Their bond deepened in that moment, a connection forged in shared experiences and dreams. But as the night wore on, a heavy silence settled over them, the tranquility of the jungle overshadowed by an unsettling feeling that crept into Steve's gut. "Why don't you try to get some sleep?" he suggested, sensing her growing fatigue. "I'll wake you if anything happens." "I don't want to miss anything," she replied stubbornly, though her eyelids were already drooping. "But if you insist..." "Trust me, you need to recharge." "I'll be right here," Steve assured her, resting a hand on her shoulder. With a soft sigh, Zelana allowed herself to lean against him, her head finding a comfortable spot on his shoulder as she drifted off to sleep. Steve remained alert, his senses heightened as he scanned the shadows of the jungle, feeling the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Hours passed, the jungle shifting as night deepened. The moon rose high, casting silvery light across the landscape, illuminating the foliage in a surreal glow. Steve's mind wandered, contemplating their next moves. They needed a solid plan to deal with the consortium if they found them. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke through the stillness, sending a jolt of adrenaline through Steve's body. He sat up straight, his heart racing as he strained to listen. The sound grew louder, coming from the direction of their makeshift camp. "Zelana," he whispered urgently, gently shaking her awake. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open, confusion quickly replaced by alertness as she scanned their surroundings. "What is it?" "I heard something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. They both listened intently, and soon the rustling returned, this time accompanied by a series of low, guttural growls. Steve's instincts kicked in, and he grabbed the makeshift spear he had been crafting. "Stay close to me," he instructed, his grip tightening around the spear as he prepared for whatever threat might emerge from the shadows. As the sounds drew closer, the underbrush parted, revealing a group of hulking figures, massive, muscular creatures with deep-set eyes and thick, leathery skin. They moved with a predatory grace, their growls echoing through the trees, sending shivers down Steve's spine. "Are those..." Zelana started, her voice trailing off as the creatures stepped into the moonlight. "Looks like they're not friendly," Steve said, taking a defensive stance. The creatures, resembling a cross between a bear and a reptilian beast, stalked toward them, their sharp claws glinting in the moonlight. The tension escalated as the creatures locked onto Steve and Zelana, recognizing them as intruders in their territory. Zelana shifted, preparing to spring into action, but Steve held up a hand. "Wait, we don't want to provoke them unless we have to." But before they could think further, one of the creatures lunged, letting out a deafening roar. "Run," Steve shouted, adrenaline surging through his veins as he grabbed Zelana's hand and sprinted away from the beasts. They dashed through the jungle, the growls of the creatures echoing behind them as they pursued. The underbrush whipped against Steve's legs as he navigated the tangled terrain, heart pounding as he fought to keep his footing. "This way," he called, veering left towards a thicket of trees that might offer cover. They ducked into the dense foliage, hoping to lose the creatures in the maze of branches. Steve glanced back, catching a glimpse of the beasts as they barreled through the underbrush, determined and relentless. "Over there," Zelana pointed to a large tree with a thick trunk and low-hanging branches. "We can climb." Without hesitation, they raced toward the tree, Steve leading the way as he leaped up to grasp a sturdy branch. He pulled himself up, urging Zelana to follow. She was quick to follow his lead, her agility allowing her to climb higher with ease. As they reached a higher branch, they nestled into the crook of the tree, breathless and wide-eyed. The sounds of the creatures grew closer, their heavy footsteps reverberating through the ground. Steve and Zelana exchanged worried glances, the reality of their precarious situation settling in. "What do we do now?" Zelana whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "Stay quiet and wait," Steve replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "If we can outlast them, they might lose interest." They held their breath, listening as the creatures prowled beneath them, sniffing the air and growling in frustration. Steve felt his heart racing, not just from fear, but from the adrenaline of the chase. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of their troubles. After what felt like an eternity, the creatures began to lose interest. Their growls faded into the distance as they moved on, searching for easier prey. Slowly, Steve exhaled, relief washing over him. "I think they're gone," he said, glancing at Zelana. "But we should stay up here for a bit longer, just in case." Zelana nodded, her eyes scanning the ground below. "I didn't expect to encounter wildlife like that so soon." "Neither did I," Steve admitted, running a hand through his hair. "We need to be more cautious. This planet is wild, and we're not its only inhabitants." After a few more minutes of tense silence, they carefully climbed down from the tree, checking their surroundings for any signs of danger. The jungle seemed peaceful again, but Steve knew better than to let his guard down. "Let's head back to the stream and reinforce our defenses," he suggested. "We need to be ready for anything." Zelana nodded in agreement, determination lighting her eyes. "We'll make sure they can't catch us off guard again." As they made their way back, Steve felt a renewed sense of purpose. The encounter had only strengthened their resolve to fight back against the consortium and protect each other. The bond they were forging in the heat of danger was becoming unbreakable, and together, they would face whatever challenges lay ahead in this uncharted world. The adventure was far from over, it was just beginning. With every step, they moved closer to their ultimate goal, not only survival but freedom and the chance to reclaim their destinies from those who sought to control them. Together, they were ready to rise against the shadows in the jungle and fight for their future.